Good afternoon, everyone. This is Commissioner Fletcher again, and for our November Superintendents Webcast. I hope everyone's off to a great start of the year. And we're almost at Christmas, so we're almost past the start of the year. So I can't believe how quickly things are flying by. We do have a relatively short Superintendents Webcast for this month, but it is packed with some really good information. So we will have some updates from our Director of Communications, Jennifer Ginn. Then also, too, you're going to see the educator shortage survey results. We have sent this out to superintendents. It is very similar, very close to the same PowerPoint and the same presentation that I gave to IJCE back probably a little over a month ago. But you're going to have a much more dynamic presenter, and Miss Leslie McKinney. She'll be going through those educator shortage survey results. But also, too, while we're on this topic, I'd like to say thank you so much to each and every superintendent for your input and your staff members. They took the time to make sure that we had this survey put ready for our legislators. Again, the better the information that we can give, the more valid information that we can give, it'll help us make decisions and also help those in the legislative world make decisions on our behalf also, too. One of the pieces of data that you're going to see there, I think that is I was very impressed by is we have 1,766 classified openings that were not filled as of, I believe, September 1. And then oddly, 1,763 certified positions. So it's a 50-50 about the number of positions that we have open. So I do want to thank our strategic data analysis, Ms. Leslie McKinney. She'll be here to give you more information on that. Also, too, we do have some information from Deputy Commissioner Thomas Woods Tucker and Dr. Michelle Searcy, who's our program coordinator for comprehensive school counseling. They're going to talk about the use of time report. And keep in mind, this is set forth in KRS 158.4416, Section 3, subsection F. So again, this is information that we're required to collect for each district and report that out. So again, just remember, this is something that is due in November. We are extending that deadline a little bit to get more information, but I'll be thankful when Dr. Tucker and Dr. Searcy will give you more information on that as we move forward. And as always, we will close with some questions and answers as we move forward. And that's our agenda for today. So if we could have a next slide, please. Again, I've welcomed everyone. I also want to take the opportunity to let you know that we were awarded a $55 million federal grant to advance statewide literacy outcomes. And again, this was a comprehensive literacy state development grant from the U.S. Department of Education, and it will be focused on using to advance literacy skills for preschool through 12th grade, with an emphasis on disadvantaged children, including children living in poverty, English learners, and children with disabilities. And of course, the grant program itself is renamed the Kentucky Comprehensive Literacy 2025. And we're going to have more information on that, I believe, when Jennifer Ginn gives our updates in just a few moments. So again, congratulations to our staff. Thank you so much to our people in OTL and others that worked towards this grant and got this on the behalf of our students and our school districts. So next slide, please. Also, too, the revised Kentucky academic standards for visual and performing arts have been adopted into law. This revision process began in the winter of 2021. And again, we have it is finally adopted into law at this point. The new adopted standards are effective and shall be implemented in Kentucky public schools no later than the second academic year following the review process. And you can get those standards on kentuckystandards.org. They are archived and shall be used until the new standards are implemented. During 2024 and 2025 school year, teachers and leaders should begin professional learning to get to know the new standards and consider instructional resources where needed to make plans for the implementation of 2025 and 2026. So again, the older standards, you can find those, but again, we're asking districts to start that preparation, if you haven't already, for the new standards to be implemented soon. If we could switch to the next slide, please. Also, Go Teach Kentucky has named 21 new ambassadors for 2024 and 25 school year. And as you know, the mission of our Go Teach Kentucky is to ensure that all students across the Commonwealth have equitable access to effective educators. And Go Teach Kentucky seeks to recruit the next generation of teachers in Kentucky. If you look at the initiative, we basically have three main goals, and that's to communicate with and inspire students in high school and college to consider teaching as a career. We also want to communicate with potential and current teachers to promote the rewards and opportunities associated with a career in teaching. Also, we want to support and promote the central focus areas, programs, and organizations of Go Teach Kentucky, and that includes Educators Rising Kentucky and Teaching and Learning Career Pathway. As a matter of fact, one of the practices that I love what's going on across our districts is the National Signing Day. We have so many districts that will do a National Signing Day just for those students who are going to go on to college to become teachers. So if you're not a part of that process, I think that's very important to highlight what's going on with Go Teach Kentucky, but also too making sure that we are celebrating those students that have decided to go on to serve later on as a teacher. Next slide, please. One of the other items that we've been working very diligently on, I would say that this topic has probably taken up anywhere from 33 to 1/3 to 33 to 40% of my time, and which has been valuable time towards our new accountability system. We did have our fall convening on October 21st and 22nd, and soon you're going to be seeing the new framework. We've called it a model framework as it looks towards what's next in accountability for Kentucky. We are looking at basically two sections of the accountability model, and that includes federal accountability. How do we handle math, reading, science, transition readiness, graduation rates, and other items, but also too a focus on local accountability. Also, too, I'm happy to announce that in January, we'll be doing some town halls. We are scheduling some time with our co-ops and also with our local communities to get more input. While we have an overall framework, there are still some decisions to be made as it relates to our framework as far as for accountability. So very exciting work. I think this is the direction that we need to go, with a huge emphasis on local accountability. And for those districts that have those local accountability models in place, we may be tapping on your shoulder to come and present at some of our town hall meetings coming up. So again, we want to thank our staff members here at KDE and also our external partners and all partners across the Commonwealth that's given us feedback during our fall convening. And then two, the information that we get as we move forward. So again, I think this is some of the most exciting work that we're doing here in Kentucky as it relates to accountability. I do want to apologize for that picture. I don't know who that gray-headed guy there is, but he looks pretty old. But everyone else in the background, including Miss Penny Christian and some others there, we're so thankful for the work that they put together for us. So again, exciting work going on with our Kentucky United We Learn Council and our accountability process as we move forward. Next slide, please. Some other items that I think that are very important too, of course, is our legislative priorities. The Kentucky Board of Education approved our list of legislative priorities for 2025, and we've taken the approach of not just looking at the upcoming short session, but also looking long term. For example, some of the items that you're going to see there, we might be able to handle in the short term, but also some asks as we move forward. As a matter of fact, one of the legislative priorities that's included talks about modernizing how we fund district facilities and construction in Kentucky. And also, I'm very thankful that our Superintendents Advisory Council with Dr. Ballinger at Rockcastle County has taken the lead. And how do we, what are some ideas that we have on how to do district facility financing as we move forward? But of course, also too, the Kentucky United We Learn work as it relates to assessment and accountability is one of the top priorities. But also too, our Numeracy Counts Act, how do we include professional development with numeracy, and also literacy coaches for the Reach to Succeed Act from Senate Bill 9 in 2022. If you want the full list of priorities, you can log on to the Kentucky Board of Education website and you can see all of those priorities. I won't go through them all, but there is a long list of items that we want to look at, not only in the short session, but also too in the budget session in 2026. So again, thankful for that vision and the work that we're moving forward. I also want to thank Dr. Brian Perry for helping with, and also Dr. Meredith Brewer and others and all the leadership here at KDE for the work that we've done to help KBE, the Kentucky Board of Education, with our legislative priorities. Next slide, please. November 1st marked the first day for Dr. Brewer officially, as she is our Associate Commissioner of Office in the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. She formerly was the Executive Director of Education Policy, worked very closely with the Kentucky Board of Education and the Kentucky Department of Education in making sure that there was great communication between the two groups. She was, before being named as OELE and also as Executive Director of Education Policy, she was the Director of the Kentucky Center of Mathematics, and she was also an elementary classroom teacher in Texas and also here in Kentucky. So you can also see some of the other items that OELE takes care of as part of the direction there. But I'm very excited for the vision that she has moving forward as developing a strategy for teacher recruitment and retention, and working with the department as we develop those strategies and working with you to make sure we get educators into our field and get them into our classrooms and recruit and retain them as we move forward. One of the things, just to give you a small example of some of the work that we've been doing, I didn't know this until recently, but there is on our website, there is a survey that a person that may be looking at an alternate pathway can take. Now, it needs to be updated to include option 9, but it asks a series of questions, as far as your degree, your experiences. And then after you answer X number of questions, it'll finally say, this is the option that's best for you. So getting information like that out to make sure that we not only streamline our options or alternate pathway options, but also making sure that we get information out to people that are interested in taking that alternate pathway. So that's just one of many different strategies that we're looking at as we move forward through OELE under the leadership of Dr. Brewer. So again, welcome aboard, Dr. Brewer, in this new capacity, and we thank you so much for the work that you're doing. The last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to Jennifer Ginn, our Director of Communications, if you've noticed in any of the emails that come from KDE, there is basically a pulse check at the end of that, and it's asking questions concerning the level of satisfaction that you may have with the service that you're getting from us. So I highly recommend that as you get emails from KDE, that you scroll down to the bottom, look for that tag, and take those surveys to help us to understand what are we doing well, maybe some things that we can work better with. And also, too, make sure that you answer the question as it relates to the topic of the question, because that goes directly back to a particular office. So again, as we focus on being a customer service organization and improving all of our processes as we look at those type of goals in our strategic plan, we need your help and your input. So again, thank you for being here today, and I'll turn it over to Jennifer Ginn for our KDE updates.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next slide, please. As usual, we've got our competitive grants up first. We have the FY25 Reading Diagnostics and Intervention Fund mini grant. Applications are due Tuesday, November 26th at 4 p.m. It's a $40,000 one-time award. There is no matching funds requirement. So these grants will provide funding to support K-3 students in reaching proficiency in reading and writing through the purchase of high-quality instructional materials aligned to the Kentucky academic standards for reading and writing. Next is the FY25 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. Applications are due December 3rd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. It's $100,000 to $150,000 per year award for up to 5 years. No matching funds. This program provides artistic and cultural enrichment academic, artistic, and cultural enrichment opportunities for students who attend high poverty and low performing schools to meet the academic standards. Next slide, please. This is the one that the Commissioner was talking about earlier. It is associated with the literacy award we got from USAID. It's the FY25 Kentucky Comprehensive Literacy KYCL grant. You're probably going to see that acronym a lot in the coming days, just so you know what it means. The deadline, applications are due December 18th at 4 p.m. The amount is $213,312 per year for up to 5 years, and it's based on district size. For a little bit more information on that, there is a story on Kentucky Teacher under the news section of when we announced the award that gives a little bit more description about anticipated awards based on district size. So as you can see, the funding will be for purchasing high-quality instructional resources for literacy and curriculum-based professional learning and coaching to support effective implementation of the high-quality instructional resources. More information about these grants can be found on the KDE Competitive Grants webpage, or you can email Jennifer Bryan. Next slide, please. We are seeking public comment again. This time it is on our current reading and writing standards. We're seeking input from stakeholders, including teachers, administrators, students, families, business and community members. The survey is open through November 30th. So please feel free to share this within your local district and community. It's always better when we get more information. Questions may be directed to Crystal Rowland, and the little QR code there will lead you to more information. Next slide, please. All right, next we have Leslie McKinney talking about educator shortage survey results. Are you there, Leslie?
I am. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yes, I am happy to provide for you a short sort of overview of the results from the educator shortage survey results that the commissioner referred to and that he shared with the interim joint committee earlier in the month of October. We are just going to go through these rather quickly, but know that you have this information to refer back to. And our goal was really to provide you with some information that would supplement the data that comes out of KEPS. We know that there are some challenges with KEPS in terms of vacancies versus postings. And so we wanted to find a way to more accurately reflect what's going on in the district in terms of vacancies with various groups. And so next slide, please. All right, just probably something to sort of point out for some context at the beginning. Just a reminder that in Kentucky, we have about 3 times as many elementary schools and about twice as many elementary schools as we do middle and high schools. And so that's going to be important for you to think about as we roll through this data, recognizing that, again, we have so many more elementary schools than we do secondary schools in Kentucky. Next slide, please. So we want to start with just a quick flashback of how districts reported vacancies that remained unfilled throughout the course of last year. And so obviously we had vacancies that came up throughout the year, but these are ones that remained unfilled all the way through the end of the school year. And we see that about 13% of all the vacancies across our schools remained unfilled by the end of that school year. You're going to see as we move through the data that we've sort of categorized the groups of vacancies into 3 main groups. The first being certified staff, next licensed staff, and that's going to include positions that are like your psychologists, certain therapists, counselors, those types of positions. And then our classified staff group is rather large in that it encompasses things from SROs to bus drivers to teachers' aides, custodians, clerks, etc. And so it is important to recognize that some of these particular groups have much larger counts of people in them, but overall about 13% of our vacancies remained unfilled across the state of Kentucky. Next slide, please. So it is good to note that when we started the school year, we had districts reporting that most districts reported having less than 10 openings at the start of the school year. And we sort of chose September 1st as that sort of critical point to define start of the school year. We know some schools do start a bit earlier than that, but as of September 1st, we had 116 of our districts stating that they had fewer or equal to 10 vacancies in their districts. And you can see those numbers as we climb up, with very few districts looking at greater than 75 districts. Next slide, please. Again, thank you so much for the 100% reporting that we got. We know that this was a new tool. It was a challenging tool. We have a lot of lessons learned that we can improve on should we continue down this path of collecting data for you. But 100% of our districts were reported in this particular collection. And what you're starting to see is, again, as of September 1st, the beginning of the school year, where those in count or those vacancies occurred by group. You can see that 1,766 classified positions remained unfilled as of September 1st. 64 of our school level administrative positions. That's going to include things like our principals, assistant principals, and instructional coaches. Our licensed educators, 447. We did pull out for the purposes of this report, the special education and early childhood teacher positions, 363 vacancies as of September 1st. And finally, our general teaching positions, which encompass a lot of different areas and certifications, 889. Next slide, please. When we talk about certification areas where we see those shortages hitting us the hardest, you can see elementary teachers rise to the top. Just a reminder again that we do have many more elementary schools in Kentucky than we do middle schools or high schools. So that's just something to keep in mind. But you can see followed quickly with our math core areas in middle school and high school, those secondary math positions rising to the top of areas where we're seeing the biggest need. And then, of course, those K-12 special area teachers that we see 139 areas that were vacancies when we started the school year this year. I'll just give you a second to look at that one, but that's okay. Or we'll jump right in. Okay, when we talk about general teaching vacancies, I do want to say that for these particular ones, we are leaning more into all of those areas we just talked about that are non-special ed and non-early childhood. And you can see that we have schools and districts sort of addressing those vacancies with mitigation factors in lots of different ways. What you'll see over on the left are a list of all the reported strategies that are being used by schools across Kentucky to sort of address the fact that they don't have enough teachers, from offering virtual options, of course, increasing class sizes, eliminating courses, utilizing subs. And it's important to note that utilizing substitutes and retired teacher utilization are the highest sort of ways that schools are addressing the impact of those shortages. We really have a high reliance. That is also concerning in that we also know we have, for lots of our schools and districts, a shortage of substitutes. So that being the number one mitigation strategy also has some unintended consequences that we also see a shortage of substitute teachers. We have administrators who are covering classes. We have outsourcing of physicians. And so just a list over on the left of all of the different ways that folks are finding to sort of address these vacancies with their general teaching positions, all of which we know come at a cost for our students in one way sometimes or the other, and also to our teachers who are having to find unique ways to sort of get around the coverage. We can't also deny the fact that one large mitigation strategy is that increasing of class sizes, which we know has an impact on the level of education we can give for our students, especially those enhanced and vibrant opportunities for learning. So just again, thinking about the repercussions of having to use some of these strategies moving forward, know that it was recognized and it was very well revealed in this collection tool, all of the challenges and ways that districts are addressing those challenges. Next slide, please. When we talk about special education and early childhood education, you can see the different certification areas that are significant issues for districts in terms of being able to fill them. Those learning behavior specialists, those MSD teachers, and then followed by our early childhood positions. So still a great many vacancies open at the start of the school year for some of our most vulnerable students. We know that that poses unique challenges to school districts as they consider how to mitigate those challenges. So next slide, and we'll look at how they're working towards doing that. And you're going to see the same types of strategies that you saw with general teaching positions being utilized here for these special education and early childhood positions. Again, a heavy reliance on substitute teachers and retired teachers, and also an increased workload for our other teachers who are having to take on some of these additional workloads, and administrators. We're also additionally seeing in some cases increased caseloads for special education teachers who already have, in some cases, very tight caseloads with IEPs and such. We also see that, again, class sizes for some of our most vulnerable student populations are a concern. But again, you're going to see several of the same mitigation strategies used here as you saw with the general education teacher vacancy situation. Next slide, please. When we talk about school level administration, we really were focused mainly on principals and assistant principals. In this case, there are about 30 AP and principal positions open in Kentucky. As of September 1st, about 30 instructional coach positions that were open as of September 1st. And these are some of the ways that folks are addressing those shortages. I will say of all of the areas, this seems to be the one where the challenge is not quite as detrimental maybe to the overall school performance, because in lots of cases, outside of using retired administrators, it looks like administration is able to carry on that workload with the existing personnel that they have, or at least anticipate filling those positions at some point. And so maybe there's some reprieve coming for them. But sharing administrative positions across schools, increasing workload of other faculty members who may be in non-administrative roles. But again, mostly what we're seeing is they're able to sort of cope with those vacancies at this point. Next slide, please. When we talk about licensed staff, we are looking at the roles that you see here, and speech pathologists and therapists and psychologists sort of rise to the top of that. We know that we have a greater demand for some of these roles than we do others in terms of the number needed to fill our school's needs. However, at the beginning of the school year, this is the vacancies of our licensed personnel across all schools, with 44 speech pathologists and 43 school psychologists leading the way in terms of the highest number of vacancies when school started across the state. Next slide, please. Dealing and looking at how are they dealing with this shortage of licensed educators. We're seeing a lot of, again, outsourcing of positions, being able to sort of work around not having those, some virtual options. We also see increased class sizes, eliminating some services in some instances, combining of classes. We do see, again, as we did with the administrative roles, the highest reported mitigation strategies state that they're able to operate without those positions in some way. Not that there aren't some unintended consequences with that, but they are able to continue operating, and that they do or they do anticipate filling those positions in the future. It is also important to understand when we look at shortages, especially if we're looking at KEPS data, oftentimes this is a category that is a little gray, in that lots of schools and districts don't necessarily post in KEPS for positions that fall in this particular category. And so it could look underrepresented. We hope that this is a bit more of an actual picture of what is still lacking once school started as of September 1st. Next slide, please. And then hitting the classified positions, you can see that those positions go all the way from 480 vacancies as of the start of school down to 8, depending on what the particular role is. Again, we have lots of repercussions here as things fall off. For example, with a shortage of bus drivers, we may have teachers who are trying to fill those roles, who may be losing planning time, who may have to leave class early in order to take those routes. Again, with bus drivers, we may see routes being doubled or even tripled in some cases, where our students are getting to and from school later, being out later. And so lots of things to consider as we think through these classified positions. But this, again, is another category where with KEPS data, the postings aren't always necessarily in alignment with what's going on in the district and those needs, because we do have a lot of these positions, such as SROs and nurses, that may be being fulfilled throughout the community with different various organizations. And so perhaps they're not being posted in KEPS, but there's still a need. And so we hope that, again, this gives you a little bit clearer picture of the support staff positions and where those vacancies were as of the start of the school year. Next slide, please. Again, over on the left, you're going to see all the different ways districts are looking to mitigate the issues related to the support staff positions being so vacant. We do see a lot of administration taking overflow. There is a hope that some of these will be filled throughout the year incrementally. We do see an increased workload of other staff members taking on a lot of the things. You know, we've got teachers and principals who are cleaning classrooms and cleaning hallways and restrooms. And so, again, lots of different ways that schools are dealing with those issues. And again, a reliance on substitute or temporary staff to sort of fill in those gaps until those positions can be filled. Next slide, please. Among certified staff, and one of the questions that we asked was last year, how did you end last year? Where did, again, were those unfilled vacancies for the 23-24 school year? And you can see special education teachers rose to sort of the top of that list when we start talking about certified staff, and then followed by, again, elementary schools, where we do know, again, there are more elementary schools than there are middle and high, all the way down to our principal vacancies. So this is just an overview of how those certified roles sort of play out with vacancies at the end of last year. Next slide, please. Speech pathologists, when we start to look at licensed positions, speech pathologists and school psychs in terms of unfilled positions that remained at the end of the school year, led the sort of pack when we talk about licensed staff members that we did still see at the end of last year. And that really does have some ramifications for the way that we look at our data this year, because this is also a challenge as we start the school year and still filling those. So we had lots that went through last year having those unfilled, and lots starting the school year with those continuing to be unfilled. Next slide, please. Teacher aides and paraprofessionals lead the pack in terms of our classified staff, in terms of the vacancies that were unfilled by the end of last year. That need is still there. And you can see these numbers really do mirror a lot, as they probably should. We're talking about the end of the school year last year being about June 1st, and the ability to get these folks hired that were already still open from the previous year by September 1st. And so we're still seeing high numbers of unfilled positions, just as we did unfilled vacancies for last school year. Next slide, please. One of the questions that we asked was how district leaders were feeling about the candidate pool that they saw before them in the hiring for the most recent school year. And interestingly enough, we can see that about half reported that the candidates are of similar quality as what they had seen in the future, but was fairly alarming is that 42%, so almost half, felt like the candidates that they were seeing were lower in quality. And we know what that means is an additional burden put on schools to get those folks up and ready to take on those roles, and the challenges that we know that you're facing in schools. And so this was just some qualitative data we had at the end to think about our future pool of candidates as you work through that. Next slide, please.
Ms. McKinney, just for a second, a quick comment about that. Superintendent Barry Lee and I, we had some conversation or some messages passed back and forth. And if we'll go back one slide, if you don't mind, Crystal, very quickly. One of the things that we talked about legislative priorities earlier, and even though we're doing our best to fill our positions, but when we look at there's 42% of our candidates that we feel may be of lower quality, there is a lot of investment of funds and time into bringing those people into whether it be a teacher, whether it be a certified classified person, to make sure we have the time and resources to bring those people to where we want them to be to meet the needs of our kids. That costs money also too. So when we talk to legislators, that's the other parts we look at too. For example, there was with the way that Title II Part A funds was taken out once it became a requirement to have a mentorship program, we really need those sources of funds so we can build our base and we can build those new teachers, and making sure that we have other funds to make sure that we meet the needs of those new teachers, and those not only new teachers, also new classified folks, new principals. Because one of the things that we learn is in order to retain people, they need a support system, but also too, to get the results that we need, there needs to be a mentorship, a networking, an area where we're training folks. So again, I appreciate not only Superintendent Barry Lee and others that have brought this to our attention, but these are things that we look at when we talk to legislators about needing funding for those type of mentorship, those type of induction programs, and those things as far as we move forward. And the last thing I'll also talk about with this particular presentation is there's a lot of conversation, a lot of research into looking at a uniform application system throughout the Commonwealth, so that if a person can fill out one application, and if they want to say, I want to send this to all districts across the state, that they can, or they can say, I just want it to go to a certain region. So we're looking into some information like that, and possibly even looking at funding from the legislature of having a common one application system for all the Commonwealth. And that would also help us as far as getting this type of data very quickly, instead of having to do a survey. or having your staff to devote time to have some parts built into this, maybe this cloud-based system, so that we can get this information as quickly as possible without having to go through your HR department. So again, this presentation has already made an impact on what we're talking about and what we're thinking about with legislators, not only with induction, mentoring programs, but also too, as far as an online application, because this type of data helps us out. And again, thank you for that time. And also too, thank you, Ms. McKinney, for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that takes us over to the use of time report with Deputy Commissioner Thomas Woods Tucker and Dr. Searcy. Sorry to step in there, Ms. Ginn.
Thank you, Commissioner Fletcher and Jennifer. We really appreciate it. Dr. Searcy and I will speak with you briefly about the school-based mental health professional use of time. I first want to start out with congratulations. We are at about 85% completion rate, but we are past the statutory deadline, as Commissioner Fletcher mentioned earlier. Although we did extend the deadline, we want to make sure we get the remaining surveys done. And I want to talk briefly about the importance of these surveys. You heard the commissioner talk about the importance of data when we look at vacancies and we look at positions being filled. This data is so important because we know the role of the importance of students and staff's mental health. So this data here allows us to seek or maintain additional funding, not only at the agency level, but potentially at the state level, federal level, and also through philanthropic organizations. So your participation and getting this to us is much appreciated. Now I'll ask Dr. Searcy to fill us in with a couple more details, and then we'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker and Dr. Fletcher. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, especially on a little bit of a dreary day that we have going on across Kentucky. Jen, if you can go on and advance that slide for me. So the school-based mental health professional use of time data collection is part of what most people refer to as the school safety bill. And in that school safety bill, our legislators knew the importance of students having access to mental health services in our schools if we were ever going to be able to keep our students and staff safe while in the school buildings. So out of that was born this piece of legislative requirement. And this says that each year by November 1st, local school district superintendents have to report on their school-based mental health professionals. So that includes your school counselors, your school psychologists, your school social workers. If you have other mental health professionals that you use district funds for, you would include those too. So in some districts, we see licensed professional clinical counselors or licensed clinician social workers that also is included in this. And in the data collection, we need to know how many people that you have that are school-based mental health professionals, the position that they held, what place they held it in the district, what their specific certification or licensure is, the source of funding for those positions, and the approximate percent of time devoted to direct student services. And that's really important because our legislators wanted to ensure that our students have access to school-based mental health professionals. So they said that 60% of those professionals' time has to be devoted specifically to direct student services. So working with students one-on-one, face-to-face. If you can go on and advance that slide for me. So what is next? As you heard, the survey was due on November 1st, but we have extended that to November 25th, and that is a hard deadline. Like Dr. Tucker had mentioned, we are currently sitting around 85% completion rate for our state. So we are still looking at about 30 districts that have to submit their data. An instructional video has been sent out and created to help school districts in completing this data accurately. And if you have any technical questions on that, you can reach out to Leslie McKinney, our past speaker just a moment ago, or if you have any required clarifications around the content of the training or the data, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. We are happy to help you get that processed. Again, that hard deadline is November 25th. So if there's anything that we can do to support you in meeting that deadline, we are certainly available to help. Thank you so much for your time.
And Dr. Searcy, can you talk a little bit about a few of our LEAs, a few of our districts that submitted the survey, but it came back incomplete? There's some missing data. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we can assist our colleagues?
Absolutely, Dr. Tucker. So some of our school districts reported their data actually by the November 1st deadline, but the data they submitted was inaccurate or incomplete. So for example, when you fill out the data, each mental health professional, their time has to equal 100%. And so we had some school districts that would submit data, but that final number wasn't 100. So we may have a school counselor, for example, in a school, and their data was only represented for 88% of their time. So they were missing 12% of that data that we needed to collect to ensure that 60% of that particular person's time was spent in direct services to students. Another thing that we saw is that the FTE wouldn't be completed. So was that employee a full-time employee at that particular school, or were they part-time? And if they were, that FTE would be adjusted. And again, that instructions are in that video that has been provided, but we are more than happy to help on a one-on-one basis if needed as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any questions? Feedback?
Doesn't look like we have any questions so far.
All right. Thank you, Jan.
Mm-hmm.
And before we wrap up with any questions whatsoever, Jen, on any part so far today? We
do not have any questions.
Okay, just before we close out, a few things about important dates, but I want to go back to say a little bit about, we talk about data and we talk about this percentage of this, your work time for our counselors. There's been a lot of great work across our districts of how do we free up our counselors to be counselors again. For example, I've worked in districts where we used counselors to chair ARC meetings. And then I've seen districts that have hired district resource teachers to particularly take that on and then really be specialized in handling those ARCs, but of course, including our counselors, but taking that paperwork off of them to make sure that they have opportunities to be counselors again. So when you start looking at the data of, what percentage of our time are counselors actually being counselors, what they're trained to do, and really taking that data seriously, I really appreciate when districts look at that data and say, okay, there needs to be a change. And how do we make sure that we meet the mental and emotional needs of our students? So thank you so much for taking data like this and making changes so that it helps our students not only in the classroom, but also to help to handle those all the issues and all the social and emotional issues that our kids bring with them through our doors. Also, too, I want to mention one other thing. Another superintendent, Mr. Tim Spencer out of Menifee County, had asked me a question earlier in the week, and this goes back to legislative priorities. We talked a little bit about, for example, the online registration of students. Up to this point, and actually all the way through, I believe, until March and April of 2026, KDE will be paying for that service that you're offering to your students and your parents about, how to register online. But that's ESSER money. We did get an extension. That's why we're able to go all the way to 2026. So just so that you know, as a district, after March, April of 2026, there will be no more funds to pay for that service that we're paying for now. So the question is, do we ask legislators for that type of funding? And there's a lot of funding as it relates to KETS that we're going to be asking for as we move forward to make sure that we're offering those services, those up-to-date services that we have. But again, that's something that questions that come up like that, I appreciate Superintendent Spencer and so many others. And again, Superintendent Lee that had sent me questions about, we talked a little bit about, teacher recruitment, teacher retention. Those informal conversations are very important because it also informs the conversations I have with legislators and also with the department and also with our board members at KBE. So thank you for that. Some other things that I wanted to point out to you also too, as far as important dates. In reading through these, it's a little bit scary to me to think that most of these are going to be after Thanksgiving. So in case I don't see you, have a great Thanksgiving. Please enjoy your family. Please take time to do that, because there's nothing more important than spending time with your family outside of your church or whatever other faith that you may have there. But again, making sure that you spend time with your family and have a great Thanksgiving. But as far as important dates, we do have the next local superintendent's advisory council will be November 26th. Keep that in mind as we move forward. And then the 2026 Teacher of the Year nominations open up on December 2nd. I know that you have some of the best teachers across, not only across the Commonwealth, but across the nation that's within our classrooms. Be sure to recognize those people and nominate them as we move forward. I also probably need to apologize to the Kentucky Board of Education. The week of December 4th and 5th, as many of you may know, there's some other things that's going on that week. House Bill 825 requires the Office of Public Accountants to do a special examination on the Kentucky Department of Education. Well, they have hired a group outside. Well, actually, it's going to be paid through our funds, but again, this audit that's going to happen with Miss Allison Ball and her office through the Auditor of Public Accounts will be conducted. There'll be some in-person interviews on December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. But we also have the Kentucky Board of Education meeting going on the 4th and 5th. So if we are not quite as accessible that week, I want to apologize. But we're going to have people here interviewing us as part of that group. We have a group from Massachusetts called the Public Consulting Group that will do in-person interviews with us here at KDE. Again, we're going to approach this in how do we become a better organization? How do we become more efficient? And then moving forward, but to get there, it's going to take some time. And that week will be a busy week here at KDE. So I apologize up front if we may be a little more difficult to get a hold of that week, but we will always try our best to meet your needs and service your needs as we go forward. Also, too, our next Superintendent's Webcast is December 10th. And then the Educational Professional Standards Board meeting is December 17th. Hard to believe that we're so close to Christmas. But before then, make sure you have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy family again, as I said before. And as always, we appreciate your being all in for our kids.